Picture this. You wake up 6 months from now, look in the mirror, and barely recognize the person staring back. Not because you've changed on the surface, but because everything about the way you move, think, and live is sharper, stronger, and more intentional. The grind you once dreaded is now a habit you can't live without. The goals you used to talk about, you've already crossed them off and set bigger ones. And it didn't happen by accident. It happened because you made a decision, drew up a plan, and executed with precision. Too many people think transformation is some mystical event that just happens when the stars align. It's not. Transformation is math. It's what you get when focused action meets consistent time. But here's the problem. Most people quit before the equation adds up. They start strong, lose focus, and tell themselves it wasn't meant to be. The truth is, in 6 months, you can rebuild your habits, restructure your mindset, and reposition your entire life if you commit to a process and refuse to fold. Today, I'm going to break down exactly how to make that happen. Not theory, not hype. A real plan to transform your life in 180 days or less. When you talk about transforming your life in 6 months, the first thing that has to be set in stone is the vision. Not just an idea, not just a loose hope. You need a clear image of exactly what that life will look like when you arrive. Too many people move through life like they're driving through fog without headlights. They think they're headed somewhere, but they don't even have the destination punched into the GPS. That's why their results feel random. You can't expect to arrive somewhere on purpose if you don't know where you're going in the first place. This is about defining the end game with precision. Not I want to be better, not I want to make more money, not I want to be happier. Those are vague wishes. You need to paint it in high definition detail. If it's money, how much exactly? If it's health, what exact weight? What level of strength, what stamina? If it's a career move, what position, what salary, what skills mastered? And most importantly, why do you want it? That why is the fuel that's going to keep you moving when the excitement wears off and the grind feels heavy. And once you've defined that end game, the next step is to reverse engineer the path to get there. This is where most people fail because they think the gap between where they are now and where they want to be is too big to cross. But the truth is, any big leap can be broken down into smaller, more manageable steps. Picture your goal as a building across town. You don't teleport there in one move. You walk block by block, street by street. When you reverse engineer, you're looking at that end result and asking, what's the last move I would make before I get there? Then what's the move before that? You keep stepping backward in time until you reach the point where you're standing right now. Doing this strips away the intimidation of the journey. Instead of a giant leap, it becomes a chain of deliberate moves. Let's say your 6-month goal is to have your body in peak condition. You imagine yourself at a certain weight, with a certain muscle tone, with energy levels through the roof. Now you work backward. You know that by month 6, you'll need to be consistently hitting certain workout numbers and following a clean nutrition plan. By month 5, you'd have already built the stamina and discipline to train at that level. By month 4, you'd have cut out the unhealthy eating patterns and solidified your gym schedule. By month 3, you'd be fully adjusted to a calorie target that supports your goal. By month 2, you'd have learned proper form and technique for the exercises you're doing. By month 1, you'd have simply committed to showing up to the gym 3 times a week and replacing one bad meal a day with a healthier choice. What you've done is create a step-by-step map that takes the goal from intimidating and far away to manageable and measurable. This reverse engineering is not just for fitness, it's for anything. If you want to grow your income in 6 months, you define the number. Then you ask yourself how you can realistically get there. Do you need to close a certain number of deals, increase your rates, add a new skill that allows you to offer more value? Each of those steps gets broken down into actionable weekly and daily moves. You're building the staircase one step at a time instead of trying to jump to the top floor in one go. This approach makes the process predictable. It removes the guesswork. You're no longer relying on, I hope I get there. You're working a plan where each day you can track whether you're on pace or falling behind. The reason this clarity matters is because without it, you'll drift. You'll wake up each day reacting to whatever shows up instead of executing on the plan. That's how 6 months pass and nothing changes. But when you've got the destination defined and the path mapped out, every morning you know exactly what you're waking up to do. And it's not just about knowing, It's about the psychological advantage you gain from certainty. Human beings can endure a lot of discomfort in work if they believe it's leading to something specific. That belief is much harder to hold on to when the target is fuzzy. A lot of people underestimate how important it is to get granular with the goal. They think writing "I want to lose weight" or "I want to start a business" is enough. It's not. You need metrics, timelines, and checkpoints. You need to know what winning looks like in measurable terms. When you see professional athletes preparing for a season, they're not just getting in shape. They're hitting certain speed times, certain strength levels, certain performance markers. That's how they know they're ready. You have to think the same way about your own transformation. Don't just plan to get better. Plan to hit specific numbers, milestones, and standards that are proof you're on track. Another thing that happens when you reverse engineer is you start to see which parts of your goal are under your control and which are not. This is critical because it forces you to focus your energy where it can actually make a difference. For example, you can control whether people buy your product tomorrow, but you can't control how many people you reach out to, how many times you promote, and how you improve your offer. You can't control exactly how fast your body will respond to training, but you can control what you eat, how often you train, and how well you recover. By breaking the goal down into controllable actions, you take ownership of the process instead of feeling powerless. You also start to see the habits and skills you'll need to develop along the way. This is huge because a lot of people set a goal without realizing they're not yet the person who can achieve it. They don't have the habits, the mindset, or the discipline it requires. Reverse engineering exposes those gaps early so you can start working on them right now instead of finding out too late. If your 6-month goal is to write and publish a book, but you've never written consistently, the first part of your plan might not even involve the book. It might involve training yourself to write 500 words every day without fail. Once that habit is in place, the rest of the plan becomes much easier to execute. The last thing about defining your end game and reverse engineering a path is that it puts you in a position of responsibility. Once the plan exists, you can't hide behind excuses like "I didn't know what to do" or "I didn't have a clear direction." You've got the map in front of you. If you don't follow it, that's on you. And that's actually empowering because it means you're not waiting on luck, timing, or outside help to get where you're going. You've taken control of the process from start to finish. That's how transformations happen. Not by hoping the future is different, but by designing it step by step and then walking the path you created. Building an unshakable routine is the foundation that holds any transformation together. Without it, even the clearest plan will fall apart. A lot of people think motivation is what gets things done, but motivation is just a spark. It fades fast. Discipline is the engine and routine is the track it runs on. When you set a routine, you're creating structure around your day so that the things that matter most to your 6-month goal happen no matter what else is going on. You're removing the decision making in the moment and replacing it with an automatic system. That's the difference between trying to and just doing. The first thing you have to understand about a powerful routine is that it's not about cramming as much as possible into your day. It's about protecting the time and energy you need for the actions that matter most. If your goal requires 2 hours of focused work daily, then your routine is built to guarantee those 2 hours are untouched. That means you decide ahead of time when they happen, and you treat them like a meeting with your future self that cannot be rescheduled. Without that level of respect for your schedule, life will fill those hours with other people's priorities and distractions. An unshakable routine starts with how you wake up. The first hour of your day is a signal to your mind about what kind of day it's going to be. If you started in chaos, hitting snooze, rushing around checking your phone before you've even sat up, you've already put yourself in a reactive state. But if you start with intentional actions that set your mindset, you step into the day with control. That doesn't mean you need a 5-hour morning ritual. It means you have a short sequence that prepares you mentally and physically for the work ahead. For some, that's exercise. For others, it's meditation, journaling, reading, or reviewing the day's top priorities. The key is that it's deliberate and repeated every day until it becomes second nature. Once the morning is locked in, the rest of your day should be structured around peak performance windows. Everyone has certain times when they're most alert and productive. For some, it's early in the morning. For others, it's mid-afternoon or late at night. You have to identify those windows and schedule your most important work during them. That way, you're not fighting against your own biology. The rest of your time can be used for secondary tasks that don't require as much mental energy. Without this awareness, you might be wasting your sharpest hours on low-value activities and trying to do your hardest work when your energy is already drained. The strength of a routine comes from repetition. Doing something once doesn't make it part of your life. Doing it daily without fail creates the groove that your mind and body fall into automatically. In the beginning, that repetition can feel forced. You might feel resistance every time it's time to sit down and work or go train or study. But as the days add up, it becomes automatic. You stop having to negotiate with yourself and the habit takes over. That's when progress speeds up because you're no longer wasting energy deciding whether or not to act. You just act. The other side of building a routine is cutting out the things that break it. Most people don't fail because they don't work hard. They fail because they let distractions creep in until their schedule is fragmented. It could be as small as checking your phone during a work session or saying yes to quick favors that eat into your time. Once your focus is broken, the quality of your work drops and your momentum fades. That's why protecting your routine is as important as creating it. You have to guard it like it's worth millions because over time it will be. This protection often requires setting boundaries with people. If you're used to being available anytime, the moment you start enforcing a routine, someone's going to notice. They might joke about it or even push back. That's when you have to remember, you're not building this schedule for them. You're building it for the future you want. If someone truly supports your growth, they'll respect those boundaries. If they don't, it's a sign they're not aligned with where you're heading. A strong routine also demands that you manage your energy, not just your time. It's possible to have hours blocked off for important work, but show up to them exhausted and unfocused because you've been running on fumes. This is why your routine should include time for rest, nutrition, and recovery. You're not a machine. You can't grind endlessly without breaking down. The point is not to see how much you can suffer, but to sustain high-level execution over the long run. That means sleeping enough, eating to fuel your body, and taking short breaks to reset your focus. The one overlooked element of an unshakable routine is that it should be adaptable without losing its core structure. Life will throw curveballs, a sick day, an emergency, unexpected changes. If your entire system collapses the moment something shifts, it's not strong enough. You should have contingency plans for how to adjust while still protecting the essentials. Maybe you can't get a full workout in, but you can still do a short session at home. Maybe you can't work for 2 hours straight, but you can break it into 4 30-minute blocks. Adaptability keeps you from losing momentum when things aren't perfect. Tracking your routine is another tool that keeps it solid. When you write down your daily actions or check them off a list, you give yourself a visual record of your consistency. This builds accountability. It also makes you aware of patterns. If you start missing certain tasks repeatedly, you can address the cause before it derails you. Without tracking, it's easy to overestimate how consistent you've been and then wonder why the results aren't coming. Over time, your routine should start to feel less like a schedule and more like part of your identity. It's not something you have to do anymore. It's just who you are. That's the ultimate goal, to build a system so ingrained in your life that breaking it feels strange. At that point, even when your 6-month transformation is complete, you'll have the structure to keep growing. The results will stick because the actions that created them are built into your daily life. When you're in the early stages, it's important not to overcomplicate it. A lot of people fail to stick to a routine because they try to change everything at once. They decide they're going to wake up earlier, train harder, eat cleaner, read more, and take on extra projects, all starting Monday. Then by Wednesday, they're overwhelmed and fall back to old habits. The smarter approach is to lock in 1 or 2 key actions first. Once they're automatic, you add more. That way, you're building on a stable foundation instead of trying to balance a tower of changes that's ready to collapse. The beauty of an unshakable routine is that it multiplies the impact of every effort you make. A single day of focus might not change much, but 100 days in a row will completely reshape your life. 6 months of consistent action will put you so far ahead of where you started that you won't even recognize yourself. And it won't feel like magic. It will feel like the natural result of showing up every day, whether you felt like it or not. That's why building this structure is the most important investment you can make in your transformation. Eliminating distractions and negative energy is one of the hardest but most necessary moves in any serious transformation. You can have the clearest plan and the strongest routine, but if your environment is pulling against you, you're going to waste energy fighting the current instead of moving forward. Distractions don't always show up as loud, obvious interruptions. Most of the time, they're subtle, small habits and influences that slowly chip away at your focus. Negative energy isn't always about people yelling or being openly hostile. It can be as quiet as doubt, passive resistance, or the kind of conversations that keep you thinking small. If you're serious about changing your life in 6 months, you can't afford to let these things take up space in your mind or your calendar. The first step is to get brutally honest about what's pulling your attention away from the work that matters. That means looking at how you spend your time hour by hour, not just in theory, but in reality. It's easy to say you're focused when you're actually scrolling your phone for just a minute every hour. Those minutes add up, they fracture your concentration and make it harder to get into deep work. The mind isn't built to instantly switch from distraction to intense focus. There's a transition period every time you come back to your tasks. So even small interruptions cost more than they seem. You have to treat your focus like it's gold. Once you give it away, you can't just snap it back instantly. Negative energy is trickier because it's not always external. Some of it lives inside you in the form of doubts, fears, and limiting beliefs. You might have people around you who feed into those doubts, sometimes without meaning to. A friend who constantly points out why something won't work, a coworker who jokes about how obsessed you are with your goal, a family member who reminds you to be realistic. These voices can plant seeds of hesitation. You have to recognize them for what they are, energy drains. Not every opinion deserves your attention, especially if it's coming from someone who's not living the life you're trying to create. You also have to look at your physical environment. If your workspace is cluttered, if your home is filled with reminders of old habits you're trying to break, you fight an uphill battle every day. Your surroundings should push you toward your goal, not pull you away from it. That might mean clearing out the junk food from your kitchen, moving your desk to a place with fewer distractions, or even changing where you spend your time so you're not constantly tempted by old routines. The less friction there is between you and the actions you need to take, the easier it will be to stay consistent. Sometimes eliminating distractions means saying no to good things in order to make space for great things. This is where people struggle because not every distraction looks like a bad habit. It could be social events, side projects, or opportunities that don't align with your main goal but still sound tempting. If you try to do everything, you dilute your focus. In a 6-month transformation, you don't have the luxury of scattering your energy. You need to go all in on the handful of actions that will make the biggest difference. That means you have to filter everything through the question, does this move me closer to my goal? If the answer is no, you have to be willing to let it go, at least for now. Negative energy often hides in relationships that feel familiar but aren't actually supportive. You might have friends or family members you've known for years who keep you anchored to the version of yourself you're trying to outgrow. They're used to you a certain way and your growth threatens that comfort. Sometimes it's subtle, little comments, inside jokes, or habits they want you to keep because it makes them feel more secure. Other times it's direct. They might outright tell you you're changing too much or too fast. The reality is, if they can't respect your path, you have to limit your exposure to them during this critical period. That doesn't mean cutting everyone off in anger. It means adjusting how much influence they have over your mindset. Technology is another major source of distraction. Social media, news feeds, endless notifications, they're designed to keep you hooked. You have to decide if your phone is a tool or a trap. In a 6-month transformation, you don't have time to lose hours in digital noise. That might mean turning off notifications, deleting certain apps, or setting specific windows of time when you allow yourself to check them. It's not about never relaxing. It's about not letting your focus leak away in ways that leave you with nothing to show for it. The mental space you create by removing distractions is just as important as the time you free up. When you're constantly bombarded with input, whether it's messages, news, or opinions, you don't leave room for your own thoughts to grow. A major part of transformation is developing the clarity to hear your own voice above the noise. That only happens when you intentionally reduce the amount of unnecessary input coming in. You have to give your mind the breathing room to process, reflect, and stay locked on the vision you've set. Another element of removing distractions and negative energy is learning to spot energy leaks early. These are situations, habits, or conversations that leave you drained instead of motivated. You can usually feel the difference immediately. If every time you interact with a certain person you walk away feeling discouraged, that's a leak. If every time you just check a social feed, you lose 30 minutes in your focus, that's a leak. You can't plug all the leaks at once, but you can start with the biggest ones. Over time, your environment becomes more and more aligned with your goals. This process can feel isolating at first. When you start pulling away from distractions and low energy influences, you might feel like you're losing parts of your old life. That's true, but you're losing the parts that were holding you back. The empty space they leave isn't a loss. It's room for new, better influences to move in. You can fill that space with people who inspire you, habits that energize you, and environments that make it easier to win. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but the sooner you start clearing out the clutter, the sooner you'll feel the benefits. The key is to remember that every distraction you remove and every negative influence you distance yourself from is an investment in your focus. Focus is the currency of transformation. Without it, even the best strategies and hardest work won't lead to the results you want in 6 months. With it, you can make progress at a speed that surprises you, and you'll look back wondering how you ever tolerated all the noise. Stacking small wins to create momentum is one of the most underrated strategies for a 6-month transformation. A lot of people believe they need one giant breakthrough to change their lives. But the truth is, change happens through a steady buildup of smaller victories. Each small win is like adding a brick to a wall. One by itself doesn't look like much, but when you keep stacking them day after day, you create something solid and undeniable. The real magic is that momentum doesn't just help you move faster, it makes it harder to stop. Once you get moving, it takes less energy to keep going, and success starts to feel natural instead of forced. The first thing to understand is that small wins aren't about lowering your standards. They're about breaking the journey into pieces you can consistently handle. If your goal is huge, starting a business, getting in peak shape, writing a book, it can feel overwhelming when you look at the whole thing at once. That's where most people quit before they even start. But when you focus on the next small, achievable step, you bypass the mental resistance. For example, instead of trying to write an entire book, you commit to writing 500 words today. Instead of trying to overhaul your diet overnight, you replace one bad meal a day with a healthy one. Each time you follow through, you create proof that you can execute, and that proof builds confidence. Confidence is the hidden fuel behind momentum. When you're starting out, you don't always have belief in yourself yet, and that can make action feel heavy. But every time you get a win, no matter how small, you give yourself evidence that you're capable. That evidence changes how you approach the next step. You attack it with more certainty. Over time, you stop doubting whether you can do it because you've built a track record that says you can. This is why small wins matter so much. They're the foundation that holds up bigger victories later. But the reason small wins are powerful is because they're easier to repeat. If the action you're trying to take is too big, it's easy to make excuses about why you can't do it today. But if it's something you know you can finish in a short, focused burst, it's harder to talk yourself out of it. That's how you get consistency. And consistency is the real driver of momentum, not random bursts of effort. If you think about it like pushing a car, the hardest part is getting it to move in the first place. Once it's rolling, you don't have to push as hard to keep it going. Small wins are the initial pushes that get you rolling. Momentum also changes your perspective on effort. At first, the work might feel like a grind because you're putting in a lot of energy without seeing big results yet. But as you stack more wins, the progress starts to compound. You realize the time you've been putting in isn't disappearing into thin air. It's building something. And when you can look back and see a streak of days where you took action, you feel a sense of pride that fuels you to keep going. Breaking a winning streak feels worse than just skipping a random day, so you're more likely to stay committed. This is why tracking your wins can be so powerful. It keeps the streak visible in your mind. One thing to watch out for is dismissing your small wins because they don't seem impressive enough. This is a trap. The size of the win doesn't matter as much as the act of winning itself. If you celebrate every forward step, you train your mind to seek progress instead of perfection. That shift in mindset is what keeps you moving during the inevitable tough days. On the days when you don't feel like doing anything, knowing that even a tiny step still counts keeps you from quitting entirely. The person who keeps showing up with small wins will always beat the person who waits for perfect conditions to make a big one. Small wins are also contagious. They spill over into other parts of your life. If you start your morning by knocking out one quick victory, you set the tone for the rest of the day. That's why some people talk about making their bed first thing in the morning. It's not about the bed. It's about starting the day with an immediate success. That energy carries into the next task, and before you know it, you've strung together multiple wins before lunch. The reverse is also true. Starting the day with delays and missed opportunities makes it harder to build momentum later. Another advantage of stacking small wins is that it makes big goals feel less risky. When you've already built a base of consistent progress, taking a bigger leap doesn't feel like you've gambled in everything. You're building on top of something solid. For example, if you've been making steady improvements to your fitness for months, signing up for a race or competition feels exciting instead of terrifying. You know you've done the work to back it up. This is the quiet power of momentum. It makes big moves feel like a natural next step instead of a desperate gamble. Small wins also act as checkpoints that help you adjust your course. When you're working on a 6-month plan, it's easy to assume you'll move in a straight line, but in reality, you'll need to make adjustments along the way. By breaking the journey into smaller steps, you give yourself more opportunities to stop, evaluate, and correct your direction before you drift too far off track. If something isn't working, you can change it without losing months of effort. Without those checkpoints, you might not realize you're heading in the wrong direction until it's too late. The mental shift that comes from stacking small wins is maybe the most valuable part of the process. You start to see yourself as someone who follows through. That identity shift is huge because once you believe that's who you are, you act in alignment with it automatically. You don't have to convince yourself to keep going. You do it because it's what you do. 6 months of stacking small wins will transform not just your circumstances, but your self-image. And once that changes, the results are much easier to sustain. This approach also protects you from burnout. If you try to go from 0 to 100 overnight, you can push so hard that you crash before you see real results. Small wins give you progress without exhausting all your resources at once. They allow you to build strength, skill, and endurance at a sustainable pace. Over time, you'll find you can handle bigger and bigger actions without feeling overwhelmed because you've trained yourself to show up consistently. The thing about momentum is that it works both ways. If you let small failures pile up, skipping a day, then another, you build negative momentum that's just as real as the positive kind. That's why protecting your streak of wins is so important. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have to avoid letting one misstep turn into a slide backward. When you do slip, the key is to get a win as soon as possible to restart the forward motion. In a 6 months transformation, the person who masters small wins will always outpace the person chasing instant results. Momentum is built one action at a time, and each one you stack makes it harder for doubt, distraction, and hesitation to slow you down. Before long, the wins you once thought were small will be your new normal, and you'll be aiming at bigger targets with the same steady confidence. That's how the compound effect of small wins turns a plan into a reality. Staying adaptable and betting on yourself is about understanding that the path you set at the start of your 6-month transformation will not look exactly the same by the time you reach the finish line. You can create the most detailed plan in the world, but life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges and opportunities your way. The people who succeed are not the ones who stick rigidly to the original version of the plan, no matter what. They're the ones who stay committed to the destination, but flexible in the route they take to get there. Adaptability is the ability to adjust without losing momentum, to pivot when needed without losing sight of the end goal. It's knowing that the commitment to your growth stays the same even if the strategy changes. When you set out to transform your life, you start with the information and resources you have in that moment. Over time, you'll learn more, develop new skills, and gain new insights. What worked in the first month might not be the most efficient approach by the 3rd month. Being adaptable means you're willing to take that new information and refine your strategy instead of stubbornly sticking to something that's no longer working. It's about being honest with yourself about what's producing results and what's just keeping you busy. Some people get trapped in repeating the same actions because they feel familiar, even if those actions aren't moving them forward anymore. Flexibility allows you to upgrade your methods without losing the discipline you've built. Betting on yourself is the mindset that fuels adaptability. It's the belief that no matter what changes come, you have the resourcefulness to figure it out. This confidence doesn't come from blind optimism. It comes from building a track record of following through and solving problems as they come. When you bet on yourself, you stop waiting for the perfect conditions, the perfect timing, or someone else to give you permission. You trust that you can handle the uncertainty, that you can learn what you don't know yet, and that you can recover from setbacks. This mindset is what allows you to take calculated risks when opportunities arise instead of letting fear talk you into staying still. Setbacks are inevitable in any transformation, and they're where adaptability shows its value. You might get injured halfway through a fitness plan, lose a client in your business, or face a personal challenge that takes up more time than you expected. If you're rigid, these disruptions can feel like the end of your progress. But if you're adaptable, you look for another way forward. If you can't run, maybe you can swim. If a client cancels, maybe it's time to focus on marketing to bring in 2 more. The key is to keep moving towards your target, even if the pace or method changes. Adaptability doesn't mean you lower your standards. It means you find another way to hit them. There's also a proactive side to adaptability. It's not just about reacting to problems. It's about scanning your environment and adjusting before a small issue becomes a major obstacle. This requires staying aware of trends, feedback, and results. For example, if you notice that your energy levels drop every afternoon, you might shift your hardest work to the morning instead of pushing through in a constant slump. If you see a faster way to achieve part of your goal, you're willing to test it instead of assuming your first idea was the best one. Being adaptable means you're not emotionally attached to any single tactic. You're attached to the outcome, and you'll use whatever legitimate approach gets you there faster and better. Betting on yourself also means investing in yourself even when it feels risky. This could be putting time into learning a new skill that will pay off later, or spending money on tools, education, or mentorship that will accelerate your progress. People who don't bet on themselves hesitate to make these investments because they're afraid they won't follow through or that it won't work. But when you truly believe in your ability to execute, you see these as smart moves rather than gamble. That belief gives you the courage to step into situations where success isn't guaranteed, but growth is. Adaptability and self-belief work together in a feedback loop. When you adapt successfully to a challenge, you build confidence in your ability to handle the next one. That confidence makes you more willing to try new approaches, which in turn increases your chances of finding a better way forward. Over time, you develop a kind of mental toughness that doesn't rely on everything going perfectly. You stop needing the path to be smooth because you've proven to yourself that you can walk it, even when it's rough. This mindset also changes how you see failure. Instead of treating it as a dead end, you see it as data. If something doesn't work, you analyze why, adjust, and try again with a smarter approach. Failure becomes part of the process instead of something to be avoided at all costs. That shift is what keeps you from quitting halfway through the transformation. Most people give up because they hit an obstacle they didn't expect and assume it means they're not cut out for the goal. When you're adaptable and betting on yourself, you see that obstacle as a challenge to overcome, not a verdict on your potential. Another part of betting on yourself is trusting your instincts. During a transformation, you'll get advice from all directions, some helpful, some not. Adaptability doesn't mean blindly following every suggestion you hear. It means listening, evaluating, and making the final call based on what aligns with your vision and values. This requires self-awareness and the willingness to stand by your decisions, even if others don't agree. You can respect other perspectives without letting them derail your focus. Being adaptable also protects you from the trap of perfectionism. If you're too focused on sticking to the exact plan you started with, you can waste time trying to make every detail perfect instead of making progress. Adaptable people understand that action beats perfection and that you can improve as you go. They're willing to make quick adjustments instead of getting stuck in endless planning. This allows them to move faster and learn more in the same amount of time. In the 6-month transformation, there will be moments when you're tempted to slow down because the road ahead looks uncertain. This is when betting on yourself matters most. You remind yourself that you've handled every challenge up to this point, that you've adapted every time you needed to, and that you're capable of figuring out whatever comes next. This inner trust keeps you moving forward when other people will stall out. Adaptability also allows you to seize unexpected opportunities. Sometimes something comes along that wasn't part of your original plan but could accelerate your progress dramatically. If you're too rigid, you might ignore it because it doesn't fit the script you wrote at the start. But when you trust yourself to pivot effectively, you can take advantage of these moments without losing your direction. These opportunities often become turning points in the transformation because they open doors you didn't even know existed when you began. Ultimately, staying adaptable and betting on yourself ensures that no matter how unpredictable the next 6 months are, you're always in motion toward your goal. You're not thrown off course by every change in circumstances because you've built the ability to adjust. You're not paralyzed by uncertainty because you've built the belief that you can handle it. Together, these qualities create a kind of resilience that's rare but powerful. The kind that allows you to not just survive challenges, but use them to your advantage. When you live by this approach, you stop fearing the unknown and start seeing it as another part of the game you've already decided you're gonna win. 6 months might sound short, but it's long enough to completely redefine who you are and how you live. If you move with purpose, you've seen the blueprint. Define exactly where you're going and work backward until you have a clear daily plan. Lock in a routine that's unshakable. Cut out the noise, the distractions, and the energy that pulls you off course. Stack small wins every single day until momentum is carrying you forward. Stay adaptable when life shifts and bet on yourself no matter how uncertain it gets. This isn't about waiting for perfect timing. It's about creating the conditions where progress is unavoidable. Every day from now until 6 months from now is a brick. Lay each one with intention and you build something you can stand on for the rest of your life. The truth is, most people will hear this and go back to business as usual. But you have a choice. You can let another half year slip away, or you can decide that this is the chapter where everything changes. 6 months from now, you'll either be glad you started today or wish you had. The decision is yours.